That climate change
I'm afraid that we are, because I think that the system that was essentially built after World War II, the system of free trade and free markets and an international economy that was not zero-sum, the NATO alliance, all of the great institutions of that period, that really then proved themselves in 1989, 1990, 1991, when we were able to unify Germany, liberate Eastern Europe, the peaceful collapse of the Soviet Union, and then on to what everyone thought was a new world order, as President George H.W. Bush put it. But that system is under a lot of strain now, and I've said it's really under strain from the four horsemen of the apocalypse, whether it is populism or I'll call it nativism, not nationalism, which I think has a different connotation, protectionism, isolationism, and we're seeing a real challenge to that system that worked so well for us.
A lot of people would say it's under threat because the principal, the creator of that system, the upholder of that system, the United States, under President Trump, doesn't seem to believe in it anymore, whether it's NATO, whether it's the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Well, in fact, this has been coming for quite a long time in the United States. Somebody asked me once, is this a revolution or an evolution? I said a revolution is what happens when you don't see an evolution coming. And I think that what we've seen is that going back really even to President Obama, if you read President Obama's interview with Jeffrey Goldberg in The Atlantic, one of the last ones that he did, it talks about how our allies dragged us into the Libya conflict. They didn't even have enough ammunition. They got me into that. They're freeload. This has been going on for a while. The kind of breakdown of the America's role as what some have called the systems operator. The fact is, though, this system won't operate without the United States of America. And one thing that this book shows is that really without the role of the United States, without the role of George H.W. Bush, I don't think we would have unified Germany completely and totally on Western terms to allow it to remain in NATO. I don't think we would have seen the peaceful dissolution of the Soviet Union. It took great skill and diplomacy, but it also took reliance on the institutions, the relationships, the alliances that had been built over a period of almost 50 years.
Do you understand where President Trump is coming from on Vladimir Putin when he stands up in Helsinki and says, essentially, I believe President Putin's denial that he meddled in the 2016 election compared to my own intelligence agencies?
Well, I don't think he said it in exactly that way. He said that, and I should believe him.
Admiringly, and he said it very strongly.
I think that part of the problem is when you're standing next to the president of another country, it's kind of hard to be really critical.
Co-author of a new book, To Build a Better World. Let me ask you about something you do write about in this book, which is that one of the reasons America is turning is these divisions, and these divisions have something to do with people who feel like they're looked down upon by city dwellers and such. But some part of that, and I ask this as a question, is some part of that also a way of telling certain groups of white people, working class whites in particular, you're better than immigrants, you're better than black people, which has historically been one of the tropes that has been used. And a lot of people argue, looking at some of President Trump's rhetoric, that he's playing the same game, that he's playing the game of trying to reassure some part of the white population by demeaning immigrants or black people. How does it look to you?
Well, there clearly is some divisive language. And there's some language that calls up old ghosts that we ought to leave buried. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. I know and understand language of that kind. But I'll tell you, it wouldn't have an appeal if there weren't something deeper going on. And I think there are two things going on. Some people have been left out. You cannot tell the unemployed steel worker in Pennsylvania or the unemployed coal worker in West Virginia that actually your life has been made better by all of this globalization. And especially if elites say, well, just listen, it is better for you. See all of those cheap goods you can buy at Walmart. The conversation's not working. And so some people really do feel left out, and there are ways to address that, better job skills matches than we have now. But something else is going on too with culture. The fact is we've lost the notion of a common American narrative. And that was a narrative in which people could come as immigrants, and at some point, with the exception of Native Americans, everybody came from someplace. And so there was that sense that people could come seeking, it doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going. There was also a sense that you weren't trapped in class. And that has broken down. And I do think that some of that is also identity politics for all the right reasons, that groups that were disadvantaged, groups that had been left out, needed voice. But we have to be careful that it doesn't become just a set of grievances or a narrative that is one that pits one ethnic group against other ethnic groups, because in that case, you are going to see the rise of white identity, and that's something that I think we really don't want to see.
But when you hear President Trump say of congressional representatives who are Somali American, they should go back to the country that they came from. When he says in Charlottesville there were good people on both sides, this seems to me such a contrast from President Bush, the Bush II, the man for whom you served, in terms of he had the first Black Secretary of State. He had the first female Black National Security Advisor, you. The way he talked about Islam after 9/11 was so thoughtful in trying to not demean the Islam as a religion. When you hear Trump, this is the repudiation of everything you and Bush were trying to do.
Look, the president needs to be a lot more careful in the way that he speaks about these things, because race is a very delicate and raw nerve in America. We have a birth defect of slavery. We have a birth defect of a number of people being treated badly, and so you need to be careful. But I will tell you, Fareed, it's not all coming out of the White House. I hear a lot coming out of the left on these issues too, that I don't like the language that is used about people. The notion that because somebody looks a certain way or is of a certain color, they ought to think a certain way. And if they don't think a certain way, then they're really not Black. And that, come on, we need to all back off. We need to watch our language toward one another. We need to start to apply that golden rule. Don't say something about somebody that you wouldn't want to be said about you. And I think we'll all be better off. So I think this is a national project, not a White House project, not a congressional project. It's a national product.
But by saying that, you have so much moral authority, given who you are and what the kind of jobs you've had. Do you have a responsibility to not just pretend that there is an equivalence here? Look at the Tory party in England. Senior Tory members, former Chancellor of the Exchequer, have essentially quit from the party, allowed themselves to be thrown out of the party rather than go along with what they saw as really bad policy. Why are there not Republicans doing the same?
It's not really bad policy. What they're objecting to something quite different, which is and by the way, thank goodness that our founding fathers gave us separation of powers, because whatever happens between the president and the Congress, he can't actually disband the Congress. So I think the British situation is different, and I think people have to make their own determination. Look, I think there's an argument that we have a president of the United States, and you've got to try and fight for the right things from whatever perch you have, within, without, however you wish to do it. I've said, and I think everybody understands, that I don't like a lot of the language that this president uses. I especially don't like the language about immigrants, because in so many ways, immigrants are an easy target. But the reason that I emphasize all of our responsibilities is if we just point fingers at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, we're not going to solve this problem. This is a very deep now set of divisions in America in which we're all looking at each other through a lens of our own narrative and our own grievances, and that is going to backfire in a multi-ethnic democracy that is not held together by race or ethnicity or nationality or religion for that matter, but we're held together by an idea, and we had better get back to that unifying idea or we're going to be in very deep trouble.
Connie Rice, pleasure to have you on, and this really is a terrific book, a kind of
you.
study in American statecraft at its best.
Thank you.
When politicians send their thoughts and prayers with no action, we say no more. We can and we will change the world.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Said. The Pope rarely smiles during this kind of photo call. He appeared eager to begin their...
We know that the first 1,000 years there was one church, it's called the Catholic Church, and the word Catholic means universal, it doesn't mean Roman. Catholic means if you're born again, raise your hand if you're born again. You're a Catholic. Brothers and sisters, Luther's protest is over.
Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and what? And the faith of Jesus Christ. This constitutes a part of earth's final warning. Obedience to God's 10 commandments and the faith of Jesus Christ. We will know when the mark of the beast is near, when we see church and state are uniting. When church and state unite, just as in the old world of Europe, etc. When church and state unite, and the church dictates to the state, and the state becomes a church in essence, a Sunday law is near, and we are nearing that crisis. And that's why I'm saying in times like these, my friends, we need an anchor for our souls. And that anchor is faith in Jesus Christ.